control. They got their money, but we've got our soul. Let's roll, never give them control. They got their money, but we've got our soul.
Welcome to Redacted Tonight. This is the show where Americans in America covering American news are called foreign agents. So the mainstream media will occasionally cover how rough most Americans have it right now. Sure, they spend more time talking about which billionaire went to outer space for 30 seconds sealed in the overhead carry-on bin of a rocket ship shaped like a dong, but still, they might squeeze in an eviction story here or there. Welcome to Redacted Tonight VIP. Hello, I'm Lee Camp. As I covered on the last episode, the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street is coming up September 17th. Organizers and activists are planning anniversary events in various cities, and one of those is Jay Ponti. He was part of the initial call for Occupy in 2011, and he's a grassroots organizer on issues ranging from Standing Rock to climate justice to fighting Wall Street. He's also the author of Be the Revolution, How Occupy Wall Street and the Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics. So we'll dig into all of that in today's episode. Hey, Jay, good to speak with you. Thanks for being here.
Brother Lee.
So I've known you since the Occupy days, and I figured you'd be a great person to chat with about the anniversary. You know, before we dig into it, for those who need a little refresher, here's Occupy Wall Street in 30 seconds or less.
Banks got bailed out, we got sold out. Banks got bailed out, we got sold out.
Where have humans been? Where have humans been?
So there's a little sampling. Can you talk about what the 2011 Occupy movement meant to you and why it caught on the way it did?
For me, it was one of, if not the most profound awakenings, political awakenings in my life. Getting hit by a police baton has a way of really shifting your worldview leftward.
Yeah.
For me, though, it would be impossible to describe the feeling of seeing so many people come out and stand and occupy public spaces. I mean, just imagine one of your friends came to you and said, "Hey, I got this great idea. Let's go get 1,000 people together and lay siege to City Hall." You'd say, "You're out of your mind," right? And yet that actually happened in LA, Zuccotti Park, all over the country, all over the world.
Yeah.
It was actually a global uprising that really changed the conversation around how we understand income inequality and I think for myself as well, you grow up learning about the police state, you grow up learning about the repression, but until you really get to see 1,000, actually it was like about 1,500 stormtroopers who came in to dismantle the occupation, until you get to experience that firsthand, you really don't understand the lengths to which the corporate state will go to repress social progress for the benefit of Wall Street, for the benefit of corporate America.
Yeah, that's a great point. It showed a lot of America the level of repression that they will use in order to shut people up. Nowadays, you have a lot of people, even people that supported the movement at the time, claiming that Occupy was a complete and utter failure. But it had a lot of powerful repercussions, kind of ripple effects that continue through our society. Without Occupy, I don't think you see the Bernie Sanders movement. I don't think you see so many people waking up to the bullshit coming out of Congress and the presidency. I'm not even sure you would have seen, Standing Rock and Black Lives Matter blow up in the way they did. What are your thoughts on the lasting impact of Occupy?
Well, people have to remember the historical context. There was no such thing as a progressive movement, so to speak. We didn't really think about it in those terms. Certainly, that only started around 2004. But after 9/11, the landscape changed tremendously, especially on the left. And Occupy made it okay for people to go and protest without a permit. And I can speak directly to the fact that the Bernie Sanders campaign would not have existed, because Bernie was actually a strategy and a tactic of Occupy Wall Street activists. There was an outfit called the People for Bernie Sanders who mobilized the entire national Occupy network, who had come together through social media and continued to organize. But it was a tactic. They knew that the Clinton candidacy would represent the continuation of the corporate state, U.S. imperialism, Wall Street hegemony. And so they mobilized that network and created 99 events for the 99%. And we know from direct sources that Bernie would not have run if he didn't see the grassroots movement behind him. Also, there were people going around the country bird dogging him, saying, Bernie, we need you to run, right? So all of that momentum, the grassroots energy, and it's important to note that it was really the grassroots that was the real power behind that campaign.
Yeah, I think that's all true. And you know, of course, it's been infuriating to watch it, you know, including our revolution most recently, be slowly co-opted and taken over by the old establishment of the Democratic Party. But that also shows how dangerous they viewed it, you know, that they went to those extents to co-opt these things, take them out, infiltrate them, and gut them. So moving on to today, you, along with others, are organizing 10th anniversary protests. Why do you feel it's time to you know, restart Occupy, or grow it in a new way, or you know, get active in a new way?
Right. So there's this thing called what do you call it? The climate apocalypse. There's a climate apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's time to panic.
Yeah.
It is officially time to panic.
Agreed.
The IPCC report came out. We have 8 years to go carbon negative, carbon neutral. If we want to save the human species after that, it's going to be we just don't know what is going to happen. And it's already starting with Texas. We saw the freezing, hell froze over. We're seeing it with wildfires. We're seeing it all over the place with cataclysm. And it's time we come together. Occupy Wall Street was a moment of radicalization. It was a time of people taking to the streets. It was a time of political awakening. It is at that moment, and nobody is coming to save us. Bernie's not coming to save us. AOC is not coming to save us. Joe Biden's not coming to save us. And it is important for the 99% to mobilize so that we can demand, just like the striking workers are doing on the Nabisco strike, just like the youth climate strike is doing on the 24th and 25th, to demand our policymakers come together. And this is actually why we need an inside and outside strategy. You can't just have electoral organizing. You can't just have outside organizing. You need both working in concert.
In a moment, I want to get to Nabisco and the other things you mentioned, but talk about like the connection, the confluence between income inequality and Wall Street, which is what was the main focus of Occupy Wall Street, and the climate catastrophe. Because I think there's probably a lot of people out there that are like, both are horrible, but they're different things.
Yeah, you cannot extricate the climate crisis from industrial capitalism. So a lot of times the onus is put on the consumer. If everybody gets an electric car, if everybody changes to energy efficient light bulbs, we are still not going to come close to meeting it. We need to nationalize fossil fuels. We need to stop all fossil fuel extraction projects immediately, which Joe Biden can do. The Democrats have a majority. They can do this. And they're already greenlighting new pipelines, which is a death sentence for humanity. So you cannot separate the two, because Wall Street funds these projects. They profit from these projects. As we know, Greenpeace did an expose where we found out that Exxon basically owns 11 elected officials, including Joe Manchin, including Kristen Sinema. They own them. And so you cannot separate the two, just like you can't separate redlining and systemic racism, the school to prison pipeline, immigrant detention centers. All of this is part of industrial capitalism, and it is. And here's the thing: what Bill McKibben once said: yes, we need the electoral facet to change. but also you can change things very quickly by affecting markets. So markets actually can make a big impact, which was behind our bank exit campaign that we launched with Susan Sarandon, asking people to take their money out of the banks funding all of these destructive industries, which again also sort of rolled into the public banking movement. We just passed AB 1177, the California coalition also has passed that. There's a big public banking movement happening across the country. So yeah, you're completely, totally right. You cannot separate the climate catastrophe from industrial capitalism.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. Not to mention the amount of money that is being extracted to a tiny number of individuals. You know, I think the last I read, 7 people have $1 trillion. 7 Americans have $1 trillion. Could easily be enough, or even if it were just appropriately taxed, it could be enough to, you know, switch this entire country to green energy. Not that that would solve all our problems, but it would certainly go a long way. And instead, we're destroying our future while enriching a tiny number of individuals. So, yeah, inequality and climate catastrophe are very much linked. They go hand in hand. So let's move on to the other things you mentioned, the Nabisco worker strike, Line 3 protests, climate justice. Talk a little about the other you know, protests and activities you're working on.
Yeah. So one of the things that, you know, again, the mainstream media narrative was Occupy failed, which is fundamentally untrue. It was a profound moment of awakening, and many of those activists have continued to go on organizing with Black Lives Matter, organizing to ban fracking. You know, we're on the front lines. Many of us joined the Standing Rock fight, and we believe this is a moment that it's time for all of us on the left, since nobody is coming to save us. It is a moment where we all have to get out of our silos and work together, standing in solidarity with striking union workers, standing in solidarity with the brothers and sisters, fighting the Line 3 pipeline, with the youth climate mobilization happening on the 24th of September. All of these other important fights, it's time for us to come together. Like Fred Hampton had the vision of the Rainbow Coalition. It's time for us to come together and unite all movements as one.
Yeah, I know. That's honestly, you want to see the ruling elite really get scared. It's when you start to talk about unity of different groups of people. It's when you start to, you know, get like Trump voters as well as leftists to realize that inequality is destroying our future, and that the rich are running away with all of the resources, while all of us are left to essentially die in drought and fires and floods and everything else. Unity, they very much don't like that. That was when they decided Fred Hampton and Malcolm X and MLK needed to go, was when they started speaking unity. I will say, though, I have been frustrated to see how few people come out nowadays to many protests, certainly nothing in the range of what we saw for Occupy. Why do you think that is? You know, what's changed?
Well, I think that for many people who were newly activated in 2016 by the Bernie Sanders campaign, by in the 2020 campaign, by the Standing Rock, there was 5 years of struggle, and it's traumatizing. So I think a lot of people were traumatized by that. A lot of people were traumatized by the Trump regime. And personally, you know, it would be nice if the Trumpers didn't live on an alternate planet where they believe that, you know, I don't know if you follow some of the QAnon conspiracies.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it'd be nice if they follow suit, but you know, you see.
Listen,
that
I would have been all in.
Living on a different planet.
I would have been all in on Pizzagate if only, you know, and believe that they had children in the basement. If only that pizza place had a basement. If it just had a basement, then yeah, let's do it.
The moment was when the guy went to go in the basement with an AR-15 and like kids eating pizza, and he opened it up to find it was a broom closet. Right, that should have been telling to those folks. But yeah, it is. It's a critical moment. Like, it is time. Like, all of us have to come together, and we're like, nobody's coming to save us. So it's time that we have to save ourselves.
I recently did an episode on Occupy Wall Street, and looking at the numbers, it appears to be one of our most suppressed episodes ever on YouTube. Clearly, the powers that be are still scared to death of Occupy. Do you feel that large protests can still spark off, considering how much different the social media landscape is now compared to 2011? I mean, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, they've all found new ways to make sure they aren't helping inspire large movements.
Absolutely. Well, there are still ways to engage those algorithms. It's helpful to learn the tactics. It's helpful to learn that, for instance, now live video is still being prioritized by those algorithms. And even though people have been experiencing a lot of fatigue from the pandemic, from the Trump regime, which was like, the Trump administration was like, riding in a NASCAR with somebody who was drunk the whole time. Like, that was kind of the feeling of, seeing of the Trump administration with the rise of actual neo-fascism. But I do believe that with big calls to action, people also don't realize that you don't hear this in corporate news, but the national activists, the national network of activists activated by Occupy, by BLM, by the Bernie Sanders campaign, by these pipeline fights, have all continued to work together. We know each other across the country. So I absolutely believe that big calls to action can it can just, and time again, we've seen a small handful of people. It starts with a small handful of people. But the corporate state wants you to believe that you're separate, different, alone. This is why Amazon's the most profitable company in the world, because industrial capitalism wants atomization. They want you to think you're alone and separate, just you and your computer, when we know the people for Bernie, handful of people, the youth runners at Standing Rock, handful of people, just a handful of us. I didn't lead this effort, but I was part of it. We pushed City Hall to divest $8 billion from Wells Fargo, just a handful of millennials and Gen Xers, no resources going against Wells Fargo. And we just won another fight for public banking, AB 1177, passed the California legislature. Should never happen. This is literally cutting out the Federal Reserve. This should never happen, and yes, it is. So don't believe it. Don't believe the hype. Each one of us have the power to ignite, set the fire that's going to change the world.
Another good example is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. A small group of activists made that a talking point, made it into a national issue, and then ultimately Trump pulled out of it, but he pulled out of it only because we had succeeded in getting people to realize what a shit show it was. We got about 20 seconds left. How can people support your work or find your work?
So if you go to jponti.com, there's also a free training called Be the Revolution. There's about 30 hours of free training. There is a book coming out in the next couple months called Be the Revolution, How the Bernie Sanders Movement and Occupy Wall Street Reshaped American Politics. But you can follow the Youth Climate Strike, where they have demands for Joe Biden. You can look up Stop Line 3. You can look up a lot of these. Just Google public banking in your wherever public banking is, and you can start any one of these. You can start your own affinity group, but you can tune in to Act TV on Friday the 17th to follow the people in Zuccotti. You can go out and start your own Occupy on Friday the 17th in joining in solidarity. It's up to us. We all have to stand up to this corporate state.
Thank you so much, Jay. Keep fighting.